By the time I got to halfway through college, I knew that winemaking sounded like the best way to kind of consolidate all of my interests.
Continuing with our series of Coombsville AVA podcasts, I'm here with Tom Farella of Farella Vineyard, and of course in Coombsville, an incredibly stunning property here with the mountains right behind us, and it's kind of, you're driving up the road and it's like, wow, oh, I should pay attention. Tom, nice to meet you. It's a pleasure.
My pleasure.
Let's just cover a little bit of basic housekeeping here in terms of your property. How many acres do you have here?
It's a 56-acre parcel, about 26 planted to grapes, and the rest is just wild forest, snakes and mountain lions, and look out.
Yeah.
But that's kind of an important point because we have nature surrounding us, and things like owl boxes, even though we have them, are kind of silly because there's just so much wildlife here. My dad bought the land back in 77. It was closed, so we're in our 50th year right now.
Interesting, talking about snakes and mountain lions and tigers and bears. Oh my! How often do you have these interactions? Are they common? Are they less common?
They seem to come in waves. There were a lot of rattlesnakes around last spring, like medium size. That probably meant there was a good mating season the year before. But the other night I was Zooming with my family. I was sitting out at a picnic table, and it was getting a little bit dark. And about 10 feet away from me, a bobcat ran by.
Oh my!
And so it's stuff like that. We've had them sleeping on the stairs right out in front before too.
I guess that's not real surprising because this is their territory.
Yeah. And daytime is one thing and nighttime is a whole nother thing. Yeah. It's like wildlife safari out here.
You're not spending a lot of time wandering around in the dark out there, I don't think.
Well, I do. I'm compelled by that. I'm a lover of nature, but of course I'm always have my wits about me. And so I used to have a dog, and then that changes everything. But without the dog, you realize that watch your back.
Yeah, no kidding. The snakes, I mean, did they present a huge risk for you? Is it just something you kind of develop a sixth sense about? It's
a little bit of a sixth sense, but also I'm hyper aware on the warm summer evening because they might be just laying out on one of the stairs here on the rocks in the middle of the driveway. So I've learned to look down everywhere. I love to hike up in the hills, and I've learned to look for every handhold if I climb up some rocks or something, because I've seen it all. I've seen them in bushes. So I'm at peace with it, and they're they're on my team as far as rodents in the vineyard and that kind of thing. But when they get near the buildings, it's a whole different dynamic. Literally, we have events and stuff. I'll go for a little scan, walk around and just look around, where they like to tuck under a rock or something. People in wine country are oblivious to their surroundings. Good for them. But so that's what I kind of, scout around and stuff.
I hesitate to bring things like that up, but it is simply a fact of life. Living here at the base of the mountain, these things are going to happen. You are dealing with the ultimate in terms of Mother Nature. So
absolutely.
Kudos to you for living here. And brings me to the question of, are you from here originally, or where are you from?
I'm from, I can look across the bay over there, San Rafael, about 30 miles as the crow flies. And interestingly, when I grew up, I'd hike the hills, nature lover.
Sure.
And look this direction and see Mount George, which is over our shoulder here, and just think, oh wow, that looks really neat, and it's just right across the bay and the marshes and the estuaries and everything. And then now I'm looking exactly in the same direction back at those hills, and it's sort of in the foreground of Mount Tamalpais out there.
That's funny.
Yeah. So very much this topography, the geography, the geology, the nature, the flowers, the trees, everything is very, very familiar. It's my backyard, basically. Yeah, pretty blessed.
When were you bitten by wine? When did wine call you?
Well, it sounds corny and phony, but my dad he was sort of an aficionado and then a connoisseur as I grew up, and his lawyering business improved. We had a pretty humble beginning, but I remember a lot of Gallo Hardy Burgundy on the table all these years. And, this was going back to the early 60s. And by the time I was 12 or 13, we took a family trip to Europe. And my dad, by then we'd had some fine wines around the house. As a 12-year-old, it wasn't weird. It was just a normal thing to have, on your birthday or something, learning about Burgundy and Bordeaux. And my dad, of course, was pretty nerdy about it back then. And but we went to Burgundy, and my brother and I were playing Frisbee out in the back of the Favela winery kind of crush pad area. And then we were kind of wandering into the vineyard and then coming back down to the crush pad, and I was seeing these machines and I was seeing the vineyards, and it just seemed so cool to me that there could be this connection between what was happening over here in the dirt and what was happening over here on this sort of clean crush pad and the machines that process the fruit. And we had a lovely tour with Joseph Favela. He took us over to Clos Vougeot, and he was the head of the Chevalier de Tatvan back then. He informally anointed my dad with the holy rootstock. This stuff. You can Google this stuff and you see the Chevalier de Tatvan is just like almost semi-religious order of. But that was really impressive. I just again I was 12 years old. I was just thinking this is really cool. And then we had lunch at their house, and this, Favela is a pretty big house and pretty famous for a long, long time. And so we had lunch in their house, and I just never forget it. Joseph says to my dad, or Guy, it was Guy. He says to my dad, "So what's your favorite Burgundy?" And my dad says Musigny. And so he slips through this kitchen door into some back room, and he comes back with a 59 Musigny.
Oh my!
And that's my birth year.
Oh.
So at 12 years old, I got it. I saw these things happening, and I was really impressed, and I was really blown away. So as a sciencey, nerdy kid growing up. By the time I got to halfway through college, I knew that winemaking sounded like the best way to kind of consolidate all of my interests. And, it involves writing and photography and, microbiology and just the fascination of watching a ferment start and, harvest timing, weather, all these things that I just loved and was very immersed in. So it was very natural. And again, it sounds like a fairy tale and a bunch of baloney, but it was a pretty steady course. And now at 46 years into my career, I'm still loving it. Yeah.
So this was basically your dad's brainchild, is that right?
Yeah, it was sort of honestly a very parallel path, because while all that was going on with me, and so at 20 years old, I started at Davis, transferred there from Humboldt and Santa Cruz, because I knew winemaking was going to be it, enology and viticulture. My father had bought this land. He'd been looking around for, I don't know, it seemed like forever, but I was only 20, so it must have been about 5 years. And he was looking for land in Sonoma, and he talked about how cool it would be to, this kind of the same old story you've heard about it, have a vineyard and a winery and blah, blah, blah. And so he was doing that, and it was funny because when I was 16, just got my driver's license, we sold a cabin in Lake Tahoe, and he bought this property for a ridiculously small amount of money for 56 acres. And I was mad because now I couldn't take my buddies up to our cabin in Tahoe anymore. And I was kind of, grousing about that, and then started spending time here, just odd jobby, worky, clearing brush. It was pretty raw land back then. And so there was plenty to do for me as far as just making some money and rounding up all the brush and, burn piles and all that kind of stuff. And it was really fun. I've always enjoyed, just that my dad loved firewood. So that's all we did was just, hang around in the woods or go backpacking or whatever. So anyways, he had found this parcel, purchased it when I was 16, 17, and then in 79 it was planted. We had a vineyard management company, Viborni, back then. And so I got to know Alex, and so now 79, 80, I started at Davis, so I was already on my way. And then Bruce Nyers hired me to work on weekends for him. He was the vice president at Phelps and did all the sales stuff for them back in a rudimentary time for Joseph Phelps Vineyards. And he just took me under his wing and really taught me about fine wine, like how to open a bottle of wine in ways that most people still don't understand, like some really simple things that I have to train people, these same things Bruce Nyers taught me. And I got to work in this old barn that was at Florida Springs and clean it up first and then bring in the barrels and all that stuff back in 1980, 81, 82, worked for Florida Springs back there. So, I'm still very, very young at this time. I'm just 20, 21 years old. I'm at Davis. I can't even drink wine legally, but I was pretty familiar. Sure. So, dinners with Bruce and Barbara at their house with my dad and my former stepmom, Annie, and just great times. And then my dad, lucky me, I mean, I'm embarrassed to say it, but Bruce and my dad would try to show off to each other. So we were drinking, Latour and some Echezot and all these things. I sorry everyone out there, but I got lucky.
I'd say
really lucky, and so that really formed my understanding of this kind of international classic wine understanding. My dad was coming from that place. That's what we've always stuck to here. Yeah. So he planted 79. He built a small winery in 85. We call it the Old Winery. It's 400 square feet. And he started crushing. And then by 85, I was working for Lou Preston up in Sonoma County. And I was there in 83. And so I would help my dad with I was kind of his technician, his making sure things didn't go wrong. White wines, I was doing filtrations and bottling for him. And then I worked for Lou till 89, and then I wanted to go to France. I had to go back to Burgundy to kind of close this loop. And I was lucky enough to get a job at Domaine Jacques Prieur. And then took another year off and went up to Oregon because I was obviously a Pinot Noir fan. And by 1990, I was ready for another job. So now I'm 10 years in the business. And I kind of talked to my dad and I said, well, I'm either all in or all out. Because I can't, mind your business while I go get a real job. But I can come home if we expand and build a bigger facility and change our label. And but there could only be one winemaker, so that was a little hard for him. But at the same time, he kind of hit the sweepstakes because I knew what I was doing. We were on the same page. We designed this building together. Literally, no architect. It was just a great joy for all of these years. Hard times, brutal stuff along the way, but for the most part. You just put your head down and go. So,
but for this particular trip, Coombsville is such an important area, and I have been a fan of this wine for a long time before you were an AVA, and you were one of those people that were instrumental in making an AVA. Thank you very much.
I wrote the petition. Yeah. With help from my assistant at the time, Brad Kitson. Yeah.
What makes Coombsville wine special?
Well, it's really amazing to me, and I love it, is if you look at the AVAs of Napa Valley, and, they go up the valley. You've got, Carneros in the south, and tends to be heavier soils and a lot of wind. And then you have, you get to Yountville, Oakville, Rutherford, St. Helena, Calistoga, and they're all crossroads, and they go up. But they share foothills on both sides of the valley. All of those appellations do. Yeah. Then you have your mountain appellations, which are topsy-turvy, curvy, every aspect imaginable. So to me, Coombsville's pretty much the only AVA that is in one geologic location. And so what makes it exciting, and this goes back to some of my Burgundy love, is I used to try to decipher why Village Von Romane can be across a driveway from Richebourg, and one's like, $500 bottle and the other one's, $80. But I have an amazing, I grew to have this incredible appreciation for it's the little things that add up to making appellations. And in Coombsville's case, we basically have two soils, and we have one climate. We're in a pocket over on one side of the valley. It's all rhyolitic tuff above us. And almost all of the Cabernet vineyards are on a slope that is just hillside that eroded down to the valley floor. And it undulates, and there's some different aspects of slope and everything, but for the most part, I've heard, without prompting, I've heard many people say, oh yeah, it's got that Coombsville character. And when I hear that, it just makes my heart sing, because I agree. There is a Coombsville character.
Totally.
It's hard to find an Oakville character unless which side of the valley are you on? Or are you on the valley floor? No, I'm not saying that's bad. It was just a kind of a 70s approach to stuff, and Coombsville ended up being a backwater, and I seized the opportunity to, make the petition and everything. There's a very long story here, but at the end of the day, it was like, we have no grapes because in 08, 09, it was the Great Recession. We had bad frost. We were devastated. We were pummeled, but I had a lot of time. So I just leaned in and got it done. And it was so easy because of the history, the naming, the geography, the geology, the climate. Sure. Everything fell into place, and then that is reflected in the wines because typically they have some vibrancy, they have the acidity that's essential to make a really grand wine. And it's just because we have this wonderful climate that's modulated proximity to the bay and these wonderful breezes. It's the last place to get hot and the first place to cool down. So it's kind of a gem in that sense that it has this individual location, unlike most of the AVAs of Napa. So there is a Coombsville character that you can actually, try to describe. I want to hear everybody's version of that.
Tom, for guests who come here, obviously this is a private tasting area. This is not something people can just drive up to.
Correct, yeah, by appointment.
Yeah, that's what I figured. And for our listeners who'd like to learn about you online, what is your website?
Farella.com, pretty easy. It's Farella, Farella.
Tom, thanks very much for taking the time today. Loved being here. Loved driving up your drive here. Thank you very much for your time.
My great pleasure. Thank you.